Hi everybody, thanks for joining me at Miniature Monthly here. In this video we'll be painting on the Voldemort we started in the previous video, so if you haven't watched that one you might want to go back and start there. We've already applied a sketch of the painting in just sort of blocks of color, and now we want to refine that sketch. One of the things I want to show is this bright light from the spell he's casting, and if you study light, one of the things you'll learn is that colored lights cast a colored shadow, and the color of that shadow will actually appear like the color that's on the opposite side of the color wheel from whatever the color of the light is. So in this case we have this green light, so that means it should be casting reddish or purplish shadows. We're going to use purple in this case because that shadow is going to be kind of desaturated by his robes, and I think purple will look really good. Also, green and purple kind of represent the colors of death and necromancy and those sorts of things. So that's another reason we're using those two colors. Now let's take a look at our palette here. I already have some colors placed here on the palette. You'll see in the corner we have a little bit of magenta and turquoise. This is phthalo turquoise and quinacridone magenta, both from Golden. We have a little Prussian blue over here. Here we have some carbon black that I've added some indigo ink to make a dark black, and a little bit of Payne's Gray ink. Over here we have a couple P3 paints, some Mara White and some Trollblood Highlight. Those give us some tones so we can add some highlights and refine sort of the highlights on the model. And then I have a little shadow green over here. Now the idea here is that we're going to mix up some purple, and mix a nice purple, magenta, and turquoise. When you mix them together, make a really bright purple. If you use red and blue instead, you'll usually get something that's a bit desaturated. So let's just mix those paints on the palette here. Now the turquoise is going to be a lot stronger than the magenta, so we can add a little bit less of that. The ratio needs to be a bit skewed to adding more magenta because this turquoise is so powerful. Now we're making like kind of a swatch of color with a bunch of different tones here within our palette, and by doing that we'll be able to have like a lot of different colors to play with, and we'll have more of a variety of color on the model. Alright, I like how that looks. I'm going to take some of this Prussian blue and just spread it out here on the palette, and we can mix with that a little bit too. Now the Prussian blue is going to make it a little bit more desaturated compared to the turquoise, but that will be good because we can have our shadows kind of desaturate as they get deeper. Alright, let's get painting on the figure here. Use it to transition the shadows a little bit. You can use the two brush technique to smooth that. This should deepen the shadows as well as adding some color tonality in there. Now you really want to make sure this goes only in the shadow area, otherwise it's going to look really strange to have magenta even anywhere close to where the green light is hitting. The reason is that if the green light were shining on a magenta object, it would actually turn it almost a brown or black. The two colors are pretty much opposite, and they will mix together when you shine a light on them. So When you mix the two opposite colors together, it will darken and desaturate. You can try that at home with a purple or green light. These can be really valuable experiments to do and to observe, because it helps to cement what we're teaching here. I recommend giving it a try next time you have sort of a colored light bulb. Try to make those observations. I'm going to use this darker purple sort of down here in the deep shadows. I can see a little bit of the speckling of the primer still here. That usually means that it's good. It'd be good to add some extra layers so that speckling kind of bit starts to fade away. And that's kind of one of the nice things about that speckling in a way, is that it's an indicator that there's still more work to do in that particular area. Again, I'm coming back with that darker purple and just adding some shadows here in those deep areas. That way we're getting more variety. I'm really liking how that's looking. I just want to rotate the model around and find these shadows and use the purple to deepen them. And if you need to blend, you can use one of your blending techniques to create that transition. I like the two brush method, or just using the glaze method to concentrate the paint where I want it to go. We can always come back and add more smoothness, so if at this stage you just want to play big solid blocks of color, I think that's usually a good way to go about it. You don't want to get too focused in on the smoothness and the minutiae at this stage of the painting. Some of these deep areas, you don't want to neglect those areas. Get the brush down in there. You can just make them really dark for now and come back and add some lights in later. Just make sure you have a good, solid, and coherent painting of the lighting. think I might take some of this Prussian blue and desaturate it a little bit with Payne's Gray ink. Let's see. Just want a dark blue that can work into these the deep areas of the smoke. Yeah. You can see a lot of those deep areas still have that speckling in it, so that was a good indicator that we needed to kind of work in some deeper shadows there. Now we can water this down and do sort of a big blended wash over the top of this. Just give us some general shading and additional color here. So I'm just mixed up a little bit of wash in my brush by tapping the top of the water. We're just going to work this wash in and then blend it with the two brush method. That's on there. We'll just blend the transition using the second brush. And that goes pretty quick. Yeah, I think that adds a lot to the nuance of our painting, and we can maybe use a bit of that blue that we're using and work that into these deep areas down in here, and through translucency is going to look really nice. The darkest shadows could kind of be represented by blue tones, and then as it transitions it'll go into sort of purpley tones, and then there'll be an area of black separating the green and the purple. Yeah. We can use this shadow green to make that transition from the area that's lit and the area that's not. Use the shadow green. I'm going to run that along the edge. And there needs to be a clear separation between the areas that are green and the areas that are purple. Usually a deep shadow will be there. I'll use the shadow green to do that. Alright. And we'll just rotate them all around and kind of work on some of these areas with the clouds, the transition. Try to give them more volume and more separation between the different shapes. Yeah, this blue is really good for that sort of thing. Now as we work in these sort of translucent layers, we might lose some of the highlights, and that's totally fine. They'll start to become like sort of the mid-tone volumes. It just means that we're going to have to come back and add some lights to this a little bit later on. A lot of times we'll go through a few stages of this where it will kind of have a sketch of the lights on there, have some translucent blended layers on top that kick that light down, and then add some more highlights on top before we add some more nuance and kick it down again. That way you have kind of like a deep sort of painting with lots of nuances to it. And I think I'll also use some of this shadow green mixed with my dark Prussian blue, dark green. We'll use that to transition this smoke into the spell here where it does so. Sort of a nasty, oily green. It gives a nice impression of evil magic. Alright, now I think we're going to take some of this Mara white. I just want to make his skin a bit whiter, a bit more where it's going to need to be. This will help me envision the light a little better. Voldemort has a really pale skin, so Bringing this all the way up to pure white, it's going to help us see what our contrast is going to look like in the end. That'll be helpful as we make decisions. Yeah, there we go. Might do one more layer here. Now let's put some of those lights into the smoke. We're going to use this Troll Blood highlight. It's kind of a warm gray. I'll mix it a little bit more white. Yeah, I think I will have a little bit of that Payne's Gray ink. Yeah. There we go. Make it a little bit less warm. And here we go. We'll add some highlights to that smoke. I actually think that smoke needs to be a little bit more blue, so I'm going to change my mix up a little bit. Add a bit more of the Payne's Gray ink in there, and then I'm lightening it with white. Now we have a few tones. Kind of hurt to mix a tiny bit of Prussian blue in. Yeah, now it's nice and cold. There we go. That's a better look. I like that color better. And there we go. I want to make sure I get this smoke that's passing in front of his robes. That way, it'll be a nice little feature. There we go. We always tint this smoke green again, using a little bit of ink on top, which was what we're going to do later. Right now we're just trying to increase the volumes. And that will make things look more three-dimensional. We can always blend this transition with the two-brush method. That value's a little bit too bright. Let's get it a little darker in there. And sort of blend that transition. coming together. I'm just, maybe some of these big clouds down below, we can make them a bit more fluffy and lighter in color. Yeah, I think we have room for one more light there. Right, mixing in a little bit of blue, getting some more tonality here. Kind of reclaiming some of these mid-tone areas a little bit that might be a little darker than we want them to be. And that'll help us transition the colors. There should be a pretty smooth transition here. I mean, these are clouds, so a smooth transition is warranted. Smooth transitions are really important for things that will sort of diffuse the light, like a cloud, or a flat finish object will diffuse the light as well. Objects that are like reflective, though, like metallic objects, transitions don't need to be quite as smooth and gradual. It'll be more abrupt and sharp. I'm going to use a little bit of that gray and give us some lights, some extra highlight on his robe. Now we're going to colorize these lights using some green ink in just a minute here. It's going to look a little weird at this moment. This will just help us have a better volume, better vision of our volumes. And again, we'll come back and maybe add just a few lights using white. Yeah, I think we'll use a little bit of this Marrow White, and I'm going to add some Titanium White to the palette, just get started on the refining these spells. I want it to be the brightest near the end of the spell. That will help it look like it's full of energy. You can get more green and dull, maybe near the where it's being cast. Now to add our green colors, we'll switch our palette around here and now to add our green colors, we're going to use ink here. We have some light green ink. We have this greenish yellow. Paint. We'll use that kind of sparingly. I have some olive green that I'll use where it transitions into the robes area. Almost out of that one. And I got a little of this fluorescent green ink. And I want to also add some titanium white to the palette to help us with our glowing effect. Right. Let's get in there with that titanium white first and just give us one more light to paint on top of. You can see how much brighter that is. That's really going to make it look like it's glowing. There we go. Let's get the back too. Try to get some of that texture of the flow of this magic. It's well sculpted, so you can use this side of a brush to kind of pick out some of those high spots. So that texture that's sculpted on there. Right, let's use that olive ink like we were talking about and kind of transition these robes a little bit more. Olive ink is more desaturated than the other inks. That's why it will look good when it's blending into this black. It won't distract from the brighter greens on the model. I'm going to use this yellowish green, and we're going to put that next to where the spell is being cast. Kind of give it more of a yellowish hue there. It'll help to have more variety in the greens. And also it'll be more bright near the tips of the spell, where it's active. Let's get a little on the front here. Going to use some of this fluorescent green as it's transitioning towards the tips, along with our light green that we have. I think having it kind of in this middle area is going to look really nice, so we're just going to lay it in there, and we can wet blend it with the light green ink that we'll use here. Yeah, maybe switch back to that fluorescent green and use it at the tip. Yeah, that's creating a nice wet blended effect. A lot more nuance than it was after our first pass. Gotta do the back, of course. We'll just come back in here and do the same thing, putting in that fluorescent green ink. Now the area here where there's no ink gets applied, and we can bring the light green ink and put it in that area and wet blend them together. By wet blending with ink, you also can blend with translucency at the same time, so you can create like a lot of different nuances by combining the translucency of the ink with a wet blending of more than one ink together. Might use that light green ink to add some color to some of these highlights we placed before. A thin layer of that. Might actually use some of the fluorescent green. Yeah, that looks better. I like the fluorescent green better. I'll use that instead. Remember, you're painting it only in the areas that are receiving the green light. I might take some of that shadow green and just kind of deepen these shadows a little bit, or transitions. Well, hopefully you found that interesting to see how we might refine our sketch further. I think next time we'll add some more details and maybe get this model finished up. So hopefully you're enjoying seeing how we might work with this colored sketch, and if you're trying the colored sketch technique out for yourself, send me some messages and show me how you're doing. If you have questions, you can always find me on the Discord channel, or send me a private message is fine too. I'll always try to get to those and give you some help as answering your questions. Hopefully you're enjoying these videos and enjoying the philosophy of painting bravely with sketches and combining or blending techniques with that. And you're enjoying seeing how we can paint these models a bit more quickly using these techniques. Well, until next time, I hope you enjoy your own painting and paint bravely.